10 months ago, a guest sat on this show and predicted that a machine would take a written spec and build the software itself inside 18 months. It took 6.
And today he's back to tell us what he's got right, what he missed, and why one app costs £75 while another costs £3,000 on the very same platform. So welcome back to CTRL-ALT-DEV, episode 32. I'm Sean Sale.
And I'm Paul Rhodes.
And this is a podcast where we press control on the hype, alt on the narrative, and dev on what's really happening in technology, AI, and the business of actually shipping software.
Yeah, and if you're new here, we run 4 formats. We do deep dives, guest interviews, show and tells, and panel reviews. And today is a guest interview. Our guest is Peter Lowe, our very first speaker that we had back in episode 7 and 8 of this show. He's a marketer. He's by his own admission a non-coder, and the man quietly outbuilding developers with a written spec and a well-crafted prompt. He's practical, grounded, and probably uncomfortable in at least one place, which means it'll be very, very useful.
We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, and the CTRL-ALT-DEV YouTube channel. So any questions you have, don't forget to write to podcast@ggapps.co.uk or the YouTube comments right. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so it's worth saying as well, we've listened to your feedback. Thank you for writing in. We're going to keep all episodes going forwards to 20 minutes unless we specify otherwise. So Peter Lowe, welcome back. Our first ever returning guest, like we said. And there's a reason we've dragged you back. Last time you sat in the chair, you predicted Mind Studio would take PRD, write its own code within 12 to 18 months, and it took 6 months. You called it, but you're out by half. I'm not having to get you. So what did you miss?
Well, I think you'll have noticed this as well. The model capability with the likes of Fable and Sol is just incredible. So
Yeah.
the speed with which they can write code and the capability that they've got. So exponentially, it was getting faster and faster. And I think that is a big contributory factor. But also, I said about I expected it to be able to write its own code, and I feel there was like a market demand for that anyway. And I think that was the direction of travel. People were sort of thinking, why do I need to piece this together if I could ask the tool to do it for me? If I've got a clear vision and a process, then it should be able to write these things for me. And I think they had feedback from users along those lines, especially from non-coders like myself, because there was a bit of a steep curve of learning little bits of JSON and handlebars. So the Mind Studio workflow builder is still there, still very capable, very reliable. But I think they've moved their vision on to something else, the ability to write the flows, and they've introduced a model called Remy, which I think we're going to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
And Peter, just for the listeners that may feel we've all dropped into this podcast from Planet Zod, we obviously have explained this in episode 7 and 8, but just to explain, because we use acronyms on this show quite a lot, a PRD. So go on. If I'm a coder like yourself, explain.
It's a product requirements document. So it's a document that we put together. I've built a skill. I had a custom GPT, which feels like such an old hat way to do things now, but it still works and it still gives a very good result. I've then turned that into a skill as well. So that helps me, goes through, asks clarifying questions. It helps me sort of think of the vision, the outcome that I want, the process we're going through, and think about things properly all the way through. It helps me document it, and it makes me think about things that are not really part of my everyday working life, things that would be important to developers like yourselves. What sort of tech stack are we thinking about, that sort of technology? Sometimes I won't know, so I'll need feedback from the developer, and that's an important part of developing the PRD. Have conversations with the people who are going to perhaps help you with it, or maybe ultimately take it from MVP to production.
And how do you know generally when a PRD is ready to build from? There's a question for you.
Well, I suppose I've got a structure which I develop, so it makes sure that there's no stone left unturned. I suppose really, there's key areas that you would look at, and as I said, my background, there's some things that I would obviously be weaker on because I don't know so much about it, but it doesn't let me off the hook. I do mine with Claude. I've told Claude to interrogate me if I'm weak and woolly, push me on it. If I don't know, then I genuinely don't know, and we put that in to say this needs further scoping or a decision we made at a later date. And it might be then that I might go off and speak to someone like Paul or yourself and sort of say, well, this is what
Or
I'm
do
doing.
deep research.
Yeah.
I think
Do
you can do it
research.
independently, can't you? But you need to
Yeah.
then verify it.
Yeah, exactly. But I often feel like having a conversation with the person that you're doing it for. It may be yourself, but if you're doing it for a client, you've got to speak to them. You've got to you've got to understand their process, what they need from it, what the obstacles are that are stopping them from getting what they want currently, or why it's taking too long. And then, if you're going to then, you're the intermediary and you're going to pass it on, it makes sense to speak to the person who you're going to pass it on, to say you're not giving them like tons of technical debt or, almost an impossible task, or they've got to unpick spaghetti, So, it's trying to be, the more you speak to people and the more you iterate through the PRD, the better it is.
Just you referencing custom GPTs made me smile because I'm in a stupid mood today, so I apologize. But do you remember, like, when I entered into tech and was learning about how to code, it was like the guys who would talk about mainframe computers and, like, like that was their era and stuff. It made me smile that, like, in a short space of time, custom GPTs now seem like that legacy thing that, like, nobody will understand in like 3 years' time. And they'll be like, what was that? Oh, it's how we started. Using it's kind of like it's just the pace, isn't it? Like in IT traditionally it's took decades to reference something as kind of like the old way of working. I know I'm kind of, probably being a bit, stupid with it, but it's when it came out your mouth and I saw you smile about how it was done. We're talking 10 months ago. And it's like just to, and like we questioned you about, in a cheeky way, why was it half? And like you said, that the pace has changed, the capabilities of these models. Just a little throwaway, we are going to do a future episode that will scare the bejesus out of everybody.
That is coming.
just about what is coming down the line in terms of that evolution. But the other thing you've mentioned already that I thought I'd just chip in was you've mentioned this skill. So you've kindly also like donated that to the listeners. So we'll make sure that goes in the show notes. So when the guys have just mentioned about PRDs and stuff and what Peter's just talked around, he's got this framework and skill. He's actually donated that to, well, giving it away to the listeners. So we'll include that in the show notes, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
so,
that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
And we did the whole episode with you on PRDs, and at the time, as we've just mentioned, it found groundbreaking. And now a machine reads one, asks a few questions, as you said, and builds from it. So the honest question, I suppose, is can a non-technical person really write a spec good enough to build from? And obviously you're saying yes, it can. As from experience, we've witnessed many good prototypes the five coders have created that may look good, but are not necessarily scalable. And Paul and I have seen security flaws. So I suppose the question here is, how do you know if what has been built is ready for production?
Well, I suppose I would say, truthfully, I don't, but I have a sort of set of a process or a set of procedure to go through to try and eliminate as much of that as I possibly can. But I'm also honest to say that, I'm not a developer. And, if I was to hand that code across to either of you and you were to sort of do an analysis of it, I would expect you to find, things wrong with it. But I'd be embarrassed if you said this is completely sort of like completely open, it's not secure or whatever. So, I sort of have a process that I go through. And with going through each of the tools, I'm sort of give it, clarifying questions and sort of talk it through. And obviously giving it context as well. So giving it sort of knowledge, and maybe reference documents, and so to adding to its own knowledge, and obviously it's knowing the outcome and I may even think about some of the weaknesses of it and try and get it to implement that. I use a few things to try and sort of cut down the code. So I use principles of this thing called ponytail.
Okay.
But basically, it's you only use the code. You only write code that you actually need, and it also audits the code base to make sure that it hasn't already been written, so it doesn't duplicate effort. Which sometimes with like tools like Lovable, it will just, oh, I need this function. It doesn't go back and check to see if the function's already been written. It just writes it again.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do is I audit it in that way and say, go back. Have you written the same function 3 or 4 times? Can you condense this?
And out of interest, Pete, just interject there. How did you know to sort of look at ponytail as an option to improve that code?
That's a great question.
Because that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we all see these tools like Lovable, Mind Studio. Well, not necessarily Mind Studio because I don't know that one, but Replit. And we're not aware that what it's doing behind the scenes is good or bad.
Yeah. I think, well, I can't remember the particular channel that I watched, but it was on YouTube. So there's another one called Caveman. And again, I've had conversations with people about reducing tokens because obviously it's quite expensive, particularly if you're on a tier model, and it's chatting away to you in the chat and sort of like, and it's really verbose. And you just think, why are you saying it like this? I don't need, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I did the other. Is that I just want you to tell me I've done the task, it's complete, and if I want to know further details, then, I'll ask you. So Caveman is about reducing the conversation to just what's required. And Ponytail is well, the idea is like it's an experienced developer who's been there since like Windows 95.
Oh, hence the ponytail. Oh, it makes sense now. I've worked with many Matrix-looking MFs who have got a ponytail.
And he sits in the basement, and you ask him to do something, and he just like, and he'd like look at the code, and he goes, "Oh, that's already there."
I can picture a former colleague.
All this function.
Real.
So
He was incredible. He was really good at tech.
And I think the concept was like, if you want something doing, ask a lazy developer, was what they said, which I think is unfair. I think it's not a lazy developer. It's actually someone who is experienced and knows not to bloat the code, not to do things, unnecessary things. Have we already done this? Can we improve what's already done? Can I recycle something that's already there? And make the code base a lot easier for people to follow. Now,
I think that's what you've just pointed out, isn't it? What does an experienced developer bring today? Guardrails and de-risking projects. That's what they bring. They've been through the kind of the evolution of everything to go, well, even though you can now, the writing of a spec and the building of a system is kind of AI's sweet spot, there's still all the stuff under that people don't even think about, and it's the keeps in the background, doesn't it? It's the unknown unknowns. But like people who are vibe coding haven't got a clue about everything that it takes to run an actual system. So that's where experienced developers can come in with their kind of from the trenches experience and go, well, actually, these are still things that it doesn't matter whether it's handcrafted or it's AI. These are things that trip over systems left, right, and center that are like to do with like performance, load. Accessibility is a massive one. So I think it's a really good thing. I'm going to check out Ponytail. I've looked at Caveman. Could you give an example of Caveman? Because I do really. You've explained what it does, but I think the example is
you really just use it as an instruction. I think it's a GitHub repository that you can tap into. But I have to say, because I'm not really from a coding background, I've just tapped into the concept. So when I'm in the chat, I will sort of say, I want you to follow these principles. I want you to reduce the chat. Only tell me the things I need to know. And then obviously using the coding principles like, compress or minify the CSS, and, make sure we haven't written the same function 3 times. Can you consolidate it? Make it easy to follow. If someone was to look at the code, you think, oh, they've done a good job here. They've actually organized it so it's easy for someone like myself to follow, rather than bits here and there, and and you're sort of like chasing a thread through the whole code, so that consolidation, I think. So Caveman is really just about reducing that verbosity of the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's sort of some of the numbers, which I can't really quantify, but they've said, that the ponytail has reduced like token burn by like 60%. And if you are paying via an API, you
Yeah.
want that, you want to reduce those costs because they can get expensive very, very quickly. And the more you iterate and sort of chat and like, you're burning tokens, you're
Yeah.
burning money,
It's
really.
basically a text interchange, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
it is generally like the way I said it in a week to somebody is like every please is billable. So when people are saying like, could you go and do this, please? And it's like kind of a very verbose thing. If you're not on a certain plan, well, it's all billable. It's all using tokens, and then the output you're getting is all using tokens. So when it's right into a notional, right into the copy or whatever, if you don't need it to be quite verbose, that's where Caveman comes in and does almost like monosyllabic, like button now red. That's what it kind of
Like
says.
talking to a
It's
14-year-old.
literally, yeah, it's like ugug, isn't it? It's like, so
So
that's the point of it.
a good PRD plus Caveman saves time, saves tokens, and exposes what you're thinking before you spend a penny. So that's great. That is Pete.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like with Ponytail, it's an interesting tool, and it can really help you sort of improve your code for someone like myself. Probably things that you would do ordinarily anyway. But
And what about because we mentioned it just very briefly, going off script here, but as Paul said, we've actually, when we audit, we look at the security and the scalability. What have you looked at in terms of those? Is there any sort of tools there that can be used there?
No, I think all I've done, I haven't really got into that because I tend to use Lovable, and Lovable's got its own security protocols. So it does help in that sense. So it sort of let me off the hook a bit with that. But if I was to use a different tool, I think I would probably come up with something and have a look.
I can confirm we do audit Lovable, and it has never passed without any major flaws.
When Pete said that, I thought, should we let him off the hook there? But no, because again, that's the thing, isn't it? Because
like
you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what
exactly.
you don't know. And we've looked at Paul and I have looked at a couple of things, Peter, and we've actually surprisingly the Vibe code has been quite surprised because of what he was led to believe on the bubble, that it was secure.
Yeah. I think there's like the good iceberg analogy, isn't there? Is like above the iceberg is the spec and the build, and then below it, if you think of everything that's required to go to production, is something that's scalable, that you want to grow as a business. Well, business is all about de-risking, isn't it? So it's like, what don't you know? And then like our audits that we've been doing, they're not just security, which a lot of ones are on the market. And like you say, Replit's got security built in, all this sort of thing. It's kind of 9 disciplines. So it's like we know from being seniors what it takes to build great software. And a simple thing is like documentation, like how maintainable is this code? How, like everything you've alluded to is great. I think based on what you said, we'll do a code audit, and you might be the first one ever who passes through with flying colours, because what you've described in your PRD, that's what worries me, is that like if everyone in a business can suddenly write a spec and they can build their own tool, who on earth's like keeping track of it all? Like
what's the governance exactly?
And it's the governance behind it.
Well, I think
that leads us onto what you were going to talk about for your second topic, which is Remy. Do you want to educate ourselves and the listener on Remy?
Yeah. So Remy is something from Mind Studio, and I suppose again they've listened to that feedback. I alluded to that at the beginning, but what they've done is quite interesting. What they've still got is a platform agnostic tool, but what they've decided is that it's aimed at a business. So the idea is that a business buys the Remy platform, and it has a complete structure, compliance, product roadmap, documentation. It produces all of that as you build the app. So you still have the PRD, you build the app, you have the vision. It takes all of that, but when it builds it actually puts all into this whole structure, all the things that you would expect an app to have. And what it does is it takes, like, say, 40 untracked AI projects that different people are doing on different platforms across the business with good intent, because they're user builders and they're building things that they want. But like I spoke to you before about a design system, and I use a design system in all of my tools. Well, in
Yeah.
there is a design system. It is the company design system. Every app is on brand for the business. There's governance in there, there's compliance, the IT can go in. When you do a cyber essentials audit, it tells you everything. It's got, sort of the maintenance part of it. So the user builders are given a license. They go on, they build the tool. It's on brand. It's completely visible. And if someone was to leave, that app remains in that ecosystem, and someone could pick it up. So that may be another user builder. It could be a head of IT, could be an AI lead, could be an external consultant or agency like yourselves. And what it does, I think, is a very interesting thing. And I think this is the next area, because the tools will get faster and faster. They will get better and better. But in terms of how it is employed, the tools are employed within an organization, to have a business platform that manages all of that is really quite interesting, because it, as you say, you mentioned about de-risking. It's, you've got full visibility. You can audit, you can see the code, you can download the code, you could pass it off to someone like yourself to do a proper code audit. Also you could invite users like yourself to support a business as maybe an external developer, to support those user builders, in their abilities to build apps, improve what they're doing, or interview them, write a spec, do a PRD, get it signed off, and build it for them in their own platform. And I think that's a very, very interesting development. And I think that that's the next race that's going to.
So that's like an ecosystem of governance that's been missing, hasn't it? Because, like you
Yeah.
say, every app has been built in isolation with almost like the solo developer sat at the computer, and it's bringing it into a company-wide infrastructure, and it's focused on like governance and compliance. So where does the developer sit in that then, like, other than just coming in and triaging it?
That's my worry.
It's like,
Well, I suppose not everyone is going to be to the, like, as I am in an organization. So, I have a go at building stuff. That may be, something that the company doesn't want. Maybe the company wants everyone to sit down, brainstorm, come up with the ideas. Where are the bottlenecks? What are the problems? What could we fix? Why does this take so long? Why can't I get a dashboard? Why can't we do fatigue reporting? Why don't we know who's on site? Why can't we have full visibility of all our purchases for on demand for a project? And that may be too big a project for the people in the room. They've got the knowledge, and maybe the operations people have got the knowledge, and the finance people have got the knowledge. So you maybe sit them down, they write a brief, you help them with a PRD, or they use the PRD builder. Then they come to you, they say, we've got our own platform, it has to go on that for compliance because we're cyber essentials and we're this, that, and the other. And you say, so we need you to work with us to build it on our platform. So you'd, instead of you doing it independently, you would use that platform. That technology in it is common technology. So I don't know whether you could build it offsite and then port it back in. I don't know, because
I guess there's a good thing here about leverage, isn't there? Because, like, I watched a Alex Hormozy podcast the other day, and it was really interesting how he was talking about that because of the productivity gains that people have had with AI, in short, they're now doing tasks that they didn't always have the time to do, which is what we've been preaching about. But he was saying, but nobody's qualifying whether those tasks should be done. So in this world, like, my head jumped to, okay, now you have like everybody in the company is capable of being like a user builder, and that's actually not what you're saying. So you could take that mindset, but actually, do you employ those people to become user builders, or do you employ like an internal team then? So it's still a team of user builders, but they're just building stuff to alleviate the pressures of the business. So it's not necessarily that everyone is going to start vibe coding in an organization, because that's not what they're there to do. They're there to report bottlenecks, like you said. Like, they need a fatigue report, okay, now we give it to the internal, say Remy Mind Studio team, or an external developer comes in. But yeah, it's still a silo task, isn't it? Of like, you need to be part of the spec writing, but actually, if you've got 1,000 staff, do you want 1,000 staff to take time off their current task to learn how to use Remy and Mind Studio? So it still becomes a siloed activity. And I think this penny dropped when I was listening to Hormozy, and he was talking about, like, the concept is leverage. And what's happening is people are picking up stuff now with AI that you really have to question, why are you even doing that now? Like, it's like, why are you working on that task? There's a reason. It's never been important enough to get round to it. So it's just an interesting thing. But when you were talking, I'll get to my point. Was I was thinking, oh, everybody in an organization becomes a user builder. I don't think it's that. Everybody in an organization contributes to bespoke software to drive the business forward, and a contribution could be part of a spec team, that sort of thing. Is that
Yeah,
is that
I
correct,
think,
what I've said?
I think that opens it up to everyone in the
Yeah.
organization. And to be honest, one of the main failings of some of the projects that you see, like the sort of AI projects, or we tried it, it failed, is that sometimes people at the top make a decision in good faith and for good reason to try and uh, alleviate a problem, solve something that's going wrong. But more often than not, they don't really go to the people who are um, actually doing the work. So you get a sort of like a distant view of what the problem is, rather than the in the trenches view of, I know exactly why this doesn't work, and I know that you have to wait for this to poll and this to come in, and you should never run it before this date because the figures will be wrong. Those are the people who are actually doing the work. And so therefore, if you sit everyone down and you've got everyone in the room, say you've got finance, operations, marketing, sales, whoever's involved in this task, or might say, we're losing so many leads in the, why are we going to an event, get loads of leads, and they don't end up in the CRM, they don't convert. What's the follow up? And then you sort of sit down and you look at it and you maybe break it down into parts and say, oh, well, maybe we can build a tool that makes it easy for everyone to just upload or forward an email for someone that should go into the CRM with a note against it. It goes in, ping, they're already
Yeah.
in, whatever it might be. So that's where you're getting that knowledge. You're solving real problems for the business. They've got full oversight because it's a platform that they can rely on, that they can be audited on, and that it's got that sort of full audit trail, governance, security, and supported by professionals.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
guess,
you might have the rogue user builder like me, but I don't think it will be the main user.
And apologies for this, listeners, because we've gone from 20 minutes now to 28 minutes. So we must sort of whittle on through and get this last question over to you, Pete.
Yeah.
So you built an end-to-end studio management tool in Remy. We mentioned, I think it was in under 2 hours, $75 of tokens, and someone in your group spent over £3,000 on theirs.
Yeah.
So come on, how do you know those are comparable builds? Or wasn't the $3,000 one just a much larger application?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to challenge you on that. I basically, the conversation was in an online sort of chat group, AI practitioners group that I'm in. And we talked about, we're all Mind Studio users, and they were talking about the cost. And some of them said it's astronomical, it's really expensive. Well, I'm stubborn. I stuck with my PRD view. I didn't sort of like go like the gold rush straight at the beginning. I waited a couple of weeks and thought, well, I'll give it a go now. And I built a very comprehensive end-to-end studio management system with books in work, and it's quite sophisticated for $75. And some people were saying, oh, I spent 3,000. Another person apparently had spent 30,000. So but what they were doing was they were iterating. They came in.
yeah,
They sort of came in with not a vague idea. They knew what they wanted to build, but they hadn't done a PRD. They haven't really thought through the consequences. You're using a Premiere Frontier model to like riff and freestyle on what you want to build. And no wonder it comes in at £3,000. You ask it to do something. I think that's one of the things that probably would improve it, because, like I said, it's in alpha, so it's still very early days. That switching the models clever, the ability to switch to a model which is more appropriate to the task.
yeah,
I'm not sure if that's in there yet or not, but that would be one way. And a lot of people are talking about like the token burn. You pay for the API credits and stuff like that. So that would be a good way. caveman, ponytail, switching the model.
So it's just a selection of it's basically, if we was to dumb it down for myself, it's the approach, isn't it? So just to summarize, when you're talking about iteration, they are literally going on, and this is what it's designed to do. It says, tell me what you want to build. And in a single sentence, almost like one shot prompting, say, build me this. And then everybody's experienced this. The nature of AI is almost like it doesn't want to get turned off. So it goes, oh, I can now do this for you. So it's that thing of like, it builds a rough model, and then you go, where would you like the door? I'll try it here. No, not there. Move it around the back. This sort of thing, like you're building a house. But it has no clear definition of done at the start, which is what we spoke about in episode 7 and 8. So what you're doing is, instead, you're going to exactly the same platform with a few additional sophisticated skills like ponytail and caveman. But in your own mind, you know what done looks like. Before you even type a letter, you know what you're trying to achieve.
I spent 2 hours writing a PRD, going backwards and forwards with Claude in my case. And sort of like, I don't know, going through it, brainstorming it, refining it. Do you want to add this? Do you want to add that? And it was very clear in the PRD. So I uploaded the PRD, and it knew what I wanted to do, what the process was, why I was doing it, what the advantages of this system would be, i.e. that we could allow other people access to it rather than it being one person end to end. It actually opened it up to like freelancers to support and have access to all the files, all the InDesign files, all the templates, all the information, so that they can actually do the task off site, but have access to all of the things, and they could log the job and we could see the progression. So that's what I did.
So
and
it's
it was
deep
very
thinking,
clear,
isn't it? It's the human driving it and deep thinking. And I think, I'm going to give out one of Paul's made up stats for the day, but I would say that puts you in the top 1% of vibe coders, because the majority don't. The majority do the single shot prompting. Every code audit we've ever done, when asking for a PRD, less than 20% even have a PRD. They go, I can give you the chat history. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help us, because that doesn't tell you what you intended to do. Like, I can't give you a measure as to how complete your MVP is if it doesn't know the starting point. But when we have a PRD,
isn't that human instinct to just dive straight in?
Well, it's a shiny new thing, isn't it? It's excitement. You can only put it down to excitement.
Yeah.
And people not thinking about return on investment, because even at $75, there's got to be a return on investment. At 30 grand, there could be a massive return on investment that we don't understand. Do you know what I mean? If that unlocks £3 million worth of pipeline, it's worth the investment. So it's like, but how can you do anything to do with de-risking a project or the return on investment if you don't know the numbers going in? And that's where I think, like, so I mean, to be selfish, that's why we wanted to get you back, Pete, because we were like, it's gone, we've gone through 10 months. 10 months in the world of AI is probably equivalent to 10 years in the old way of working. We wouldn't have had that much evolution. And I think it's just the 3 good stories. So we've covered off, like the predictions, the fact it's accelerated. We've covered off Remy and how vibe coding, the market is demanding this tooling. That's what's happened, isn't it? You've repeatedly referred to Mind Studio adapting to user feedback, and then how you can build something that is, compared to ourselves, is wildly inexpensive. I cannot build you something for £75 from scratch unless you have a PRD or that sort of thing. So it's like, in the old way, the old money, it would have been tens of thousands of pounds. Without even looking at what you built today, I could hazard a guess, teams, even if you're offshoring, would be thousands. So it's that economic shift is another reason, I think, Sean, why people are diving into it, because it's deemed as cheap. But then we've got somebody who spent 30,000. Exactly. So that's kind of a misconception as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. So thanks again, Peter, for today. So one thing, you got the direction right and you got the timeline wrong, but I don't think he minds that. Everything is accelerating, as we just said, and plan for that. 2, the bottleneck has moved. The scarce skill isn't coding anymore. It's writing something unambiguous. Clarity is the job. And number 3, the value of a platform like Remy isn't speed, it's visibility. 40 invisible AI projects is a risk register, not a strategy.
Yeah, I'm going to put the links in the show notes. Remy by Mind Studio, Ponytail, and Pete's PRD generator skill. plus our own discovery template from episode 8, which is suddenly very fashionable again. And you heard it here, Peter's coming back onto the panel review, which we're going to do shortly, that we're hoping to scare everybody with. So if you've got any questions, as usual, you can email podcast@ggapps.co.uk. There's no ads on this show. So if today's episode earned it, share it with one person who gets something from it. That's our only ask.
And until next week, press control on the hype, alter the narrative, and dev on what's really happening. See you then.
Cheers. Bye-bye.